a psychological domestic thriller of betrayal, blood ties, and buried truths. You don't expect to be stabbed in the back by your own sister, not after everything you've done for her. But here I am, bleeding from a wound I never saw coming. My name is Julian Reyes. I'm 38, a civil engineer by trade, and up until a year ago, a married man with what I thought was a picture-perfect life. A 4-bedroom home in the cul-de-sac of Serenity, 2 golden retrievers, and a son, named Dylan. Or so I believed. The unraveling began not with a bang, but with a signature. My ex-wife, Melissa, had filed for divorce seemingly out of the blue. "We've grown apart," she said. "It's not you. I just need something else." That something else, I'd later discover, was a personal trainer named Kieran who looked like a Calvin Klein ad in motion. Fine. Let her go, I thought. But then came the child support order. It was astronomical, more than I made monthly after taxes. I was floored. "Why are they saying I make this much?" I asked my lawyer, shoving the court documents across his desk. He looked up from the pages, confused. "Julian, they submitted tax documents, pay stubs, your firm's quarterly bonuses, everything checks out. They even had additional income, streams listed, consulting fees, rental earnings, all verified. But I never—" My heart sank. Only 2 people had access to that kind of information. Me and my sister Natalia. Natalia was a paralegal, sharp, quiet, always the listener in the family. When Melissa and I had first started having trouble, I confided in Natalia, told her everything, every vulnerability, every late-night argument, even the time I spent helping Dylan with his school projects while Melissa was out late and at yoga. I should have known something was off when Natalia stopped returning my texts. She said she was just swamped at work, but my gut said otherwise, so I started investigating. Act 1. The documents late one night, I got a call from an old colleague, Armand, who worked IT for the firm where Natalia's boss, a cutthroat family attorney named Marcy Volin, handled high-profile divorces. "Jules," he whispered. "I saw a familiar name in the metadata of a file that just passed through our shared server. Thought you'd want to know." He sent the file. Encrypted, but not to me. Natalia's digital fingerprint was all over it. Internal memos, financial disclosures. She had pulled the documents from my cloud archive and passed them to Melissa's legal team. But why? I drove to her apartment that night, knocked, waited. She answered, robe on, hair in a towel. "You helped her?" I asked, voice low. Natalia didn't deny it, didn't even blink. "She's Dylan's mother," she said. "He deserves security. You were going to fight her in court. Destroy her." "You destroyed me first," I said. Act 2. The deal I dug. Deeper. I found that Melissa's new boyfriend, Kieran, wasn't just a trainer. He was the son of one of Marcy Volin's biggest clients. Kieran had a sealed record for assault. Melissa had filed restraining orders in the past, on other men. Patterns began to emerge. I met with my new private investigator, Zara Malik, ex-police, sharp as broken glass. Within 2 weeks, she had unearthed a trove of buried emails and burner phone messages. Natalia had been receiving payments, untraceable, transfers through Zelle and cryptocurrency. She was bribed, Zara told me, sliding a photo across the cafe table. "Melissa offered her money to hand over your private files. It was all orchestrated. Natalia was the Trojan horse. And the worst part? Dylan wasn't mine. A paternity test, ordered quietly, confirmed it. Act 3. The showdown I didn't. Go to the courts right away. No, I waited. I watched. I collected. I planted false data in a decoy cloud folder, claiming I was offloading overseas income to avoid taxes. Days later, the IRS flagged me. That folder had been accessed by Natalia's work terminal. I had everything. I confronted Natalia one last time. At our childhood home. She was cleaning out Mom's attic. You sold me out for her? I asked. Natalia shook her head, tears welling. I didn't do it for her. I did it for Dylan, because she said you were going to fight for full custody, just to spite her. You were becoming cold, vengeful. I thought I was protecting him. He's not my son, I said quietly. Her face went white. You didn't know either, did you? The twist I went to court. Melissa didn't show. Arrested 2 days prior for embezzlement. Turns out the money she promised Natalia, it wasn't hers to give. She had been draining funds from a non-profit where she worked. Kieran disappeared, took Melissa's accounts and vanished offshore. Natalia was charged as a co-conspirator, data, theft, breach of privacy, and obstruction. The court annulled the child support claim, but the damage? Irreparable. Epilogue. People think betrayal is a knife to the back. But the truth? It's a slow turning of the blade, one twist at a time until you're too numb to scream. I moved away. New city. New number. Sometimes I see Dylan's face in a crowd. A phantom echo of a life that never truly was, and I remember the one lesson betrayal teaches best. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't bleed. They just never heal. I didn't sleep the night after Julian confronted me. I sat in Mom's attic until the first light stretched across the boxes and dust. My hands shook from more than cold. The lie I'd told myself, that I was protecting Dylan, was unraveling faster than my nerves because I did betray Julian. But it wasn't as simple as that. Let me take you back. Flashback. 10 months earlier. Julian called me late one night. He was drunk, his voice slurring, bitterness spilling like wine. He told me Melissa was cheating, said he wanted full custody of Dylan. Said she was a manipulative, lying snake and he would bury her in court. I didn't say much, just listened. I always did. But that call, and it worried me. Melissa had come to me the next day. She looked like hell. Skin pale, lips chapped. She cried in my office, not as a client, as a woman, a mother. I made a mistake, she confessed. But I'm scared Julian's going to take Dylan just to punish me. I knew Julian had a temper, not violent, but cold, strategic, a master of retribution when he felt wronged. I'd seen it with ex-friends, former employers. I didn't doubt he'd weaponize the court if pushed. So when Melissa asked for help, I hesitated until she showed me the bruises, small ones, faint, on her wrist. I wasn't sure if they were real, but doubt cracked my conviction. I don't want anything from him, she said. Just help me protect Dylan. And that's when the lie started to grow teeth. The dissent I accessed Julian's financials. Not to sabotage him, I told myself, but to paint a fair picture in court. But Melissa didn't want fair. She wanted vengeance. She leaked numbers to Marcy Vollen, who inflated them to force the child support ruling. When I protested, Melissa smiled, cold. You're in this now, Nat. If I go down, you go down. That's when I realized it wasn't about Dylan. It was about control. She'd used me, played me like a fiddle, and I had let her. The breaking point. Then came the day Zara Malik visited my office. You're in over your head, she told me, laying down a folder of surveillance stills. Melissa's going to burn you. She slid a manila envelope across the table. This is what she's been hiding. Inside were wire transfers, fake IDs, and photos of Kieran roughing up a man. Outside a bar. You think Julian's dangerous? Zara said. Try them. That night, I did what I never thought I would. I followed Melissa. She wasn't at the gym. She wasn't with Dylan. She was at a bank, closing out an account. 2 days later, she vanished. Natalia Nowai stood before the judge in a gray pantsuit that fit too tight across the shoulders. Not because I gained weight, but because the guilt wouldn't let me breathe. I was manipulated, I told the court. I thought I was protecting a child. The judge didn't look at me, just signed. Probation, community service. Record, marked. Career over. Julian didn't show up to the hearing. I wrote him a letter, never sent it. Excerpt from the unsent letter. You think I chose Melissa over you? I didn't. I chose Dylan, or who I thought was Dylan. I didn't know the truth, not until it was too late. I didn't see how deep her lies went. I thought I was shielding a child from two people at war. Instead, I was fueling the fire. You were right about her. About me. I betrayed you. I accept that. But somewhere in that mess, I still believed I was doing the right thing. And maybe that's what makes it all worse, that I couldn't tell the difference. Epilogue, 6 months later. Natalia now works at a legal aid office in another state, under a pseudonym. Low pay, long hours, but real work. Honest work. She helps battered women escape their abusers, atoning in her own way. Julian? Last she heard, he was in Austin. New job, alone, quiet. They haven't spoken. But every year, on Dylan's birthday, she lights a candle for the child they both lost and the bond she helped destroy. Julian sat at a corner table of the small cafe off 6th Street, rain pattering against the window. He'd just finished reading a deposition draft when he saw her, Melissa, hair longer, skin paler, eyes shadowed by years of evasion. She walked in like a ghost, real yet slightly out of place, and for a split second, her eyes met his. She froze, but she didn't run. Julian stood. His voice was low and even. Sit down. Melissa hesitated, then slowly slid into the seat across from him, her trembling hands pulling her jacket tighter, around her. Julian. 2 years, not a call, not even a letter. You disappear, rob me blind, lie in court, and you just show up in my city? Melissa. I didn't know you were here. Julian. Bullshit. Silence. She glanced around. The cafe was mostly empty, safe enough for confessions, or a trap. Melissa. Quietly. I needed to disappear. Kieran was dangerous. Julian. You weren't exactly safe either. Natalia nearly lost everything because of you. Melissa. She made her choice. I never forced her. Julian. No, you just fed her half-truths and held your kid over her head like a hostage. Melissa's jaw clenched. Melissa. Our kid. Julian looked her dead in the eyes. Julian. I got a DNA test 6 months ago. Dylan isn't mine. And there it was. Her mask cracked barely, but enough for him to see something flicker beneath. Shame. Or something older. Regret's twisted cousin. Melissa, softly. I knew. I just never wanted to admit it. Julian leaned in. Julian. Whose? Is he? Melissa. Kieran's. Julian. And where is he now? Melissa. Dead. Julian blinked. Melissa. Overdosed in a motel in Phoenix. 2 months ago. I've been running from his people ever since. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive, sliding it across the table. Melissa, this has everything. Bank records, voice memos, video clips. Proof of what we did, what I did. You can take it to the feds, the bar association, whoever you want. Julian. Why give it to me? Melissa. Because I'm tired. Because I still see Dylan looking for you at night. Because I don't want to die without making something right. He didn't touch the drive. Julian. Why now? Melissa. Because I heard what you did. For Natalia. Helping her get her license back. You still protected her even after everything. Julian. You always underestimate loyalty. Melissa. And you always overestimate people. That night Julian sat in his apartment, flash drive in hand, screen flickering in the dark. He clicked it open. Inside, a folder titled Before Everything Burned, Emails, Transactions, a recorded phone call between Melissa and Kieran, planning to forge financial abuse claims, a video of Kieran bragging about breaking Reyes and milking the courts, Even a letter Melissa wrote, but never sent to Julian, apologizing. 1 week later, FBI office, Austin Julian handed over the flash drive to Agent Zara Malik. Zara, didn't think I'd see you again. Julian, just cleaning up some old ghosts. Zara, eyeing the files. You realize you're about to burn a whole network of people? Julian, good. Maybe then I'll finally be able to breathe. Epilogue. 3 months later. Melissa entered witness protection in exchange for testimony. Dylan was placed with his paternal grandmother, a quiet woman in Arizona who sent Julian pictures once a month. Natalia now speaks to Julian again. Brief V. Calls. Coffee once every few weeks. A fragile peace. And Julian? He moved again. Left Austin. Started writing. A memoir, maybe. Or a confession. He hasn't decided. But every night he sits at his desk and opens a folder on his computer titled The A. Fire they lit, the ashes I own. But there's one last mystery. A name buried deep in Melissa's files. Someone who paid to have Julian discredited long before Melissa met Kieran. A judge, a rival, a fixer, someone who's still out there, pulling strings, protecting a bigger secret. And Julian, he just lit a match. A hidden name, a hidden motive, and a truth that could set everything ablaze again. 3 weeks later, Savannah. Georgia Julian leaned against a brick wall, watching the courthouse across the street. His breath fogged in the chill morning air. His eyes trained on a woman stepping down the marble steps, federal judge Margot Lafferty, silver hair, pearls at her throat, and a grace that concealed her venom. She looked exactly like she did in the photograph Julian found buried inside one of Melissa's encrypted folders, except in that photo she was sitting beside Kieran, smiling. Why would a sitting federal judge be photographed at a private resort with a known corporate fixer? That question had chewed at Julian like rot. He dug hard. And what he found beneath the surface was far uglier than he expected. 12. Years ago. The deal Julian had been a rising star in white-collar defense, young, loud, fearless in the courtroom. His firm had taken on a whistleblower case against a major defense contractor, Veriton Dynamics. That contractor had one very important friend in Washington, Judge Lafferty. Back then, she wasn't yet in robes. She was a political liaison for the Department of Defense, and she'd personally intervened to bury the case. But Julian didn't fold. He filed a motion that made headlines. Public pressure forced Veriton to settle. Quietly, but not cheap. That cost someone their promotion. That embarrassed someone in power. That person was Margot Lafferty, and she didn't forget. Present day. The Trap Julian booked a meeting with a journalist friend in Atlanta, Raquel Hines, an investigative reporter who specialized in judicial corruption. Together, they built a timeline. Veriton Dynamics secretly funded Kieran's consulting firm. Lafferty was on their payroll for strategic advisement. Melissa received monthly stipends tied to shell companies traced back to Veriton's subsidiaries, starting 6 months before she even met Julian. Melissa's custody motion, filed in the same district Lafferty presided over. Kieran's influence, amplified by connections to Lafferty's staffers, everything was orchestrated. Julian to Raquel. I was a test case, a quiet revenge hit. If it worked, they'd know how to destroy anyone. Raquel. And if it didn't? Julian. Then I'd be another name on the pile, another guy ruined by scandal. No one would question. A new player appears, the man in the gray suit. 2 days after Raquel published her expose draft privately on a secure server, Julian received an anonymous envelope, no return address. Inside, a photograph of Raquel leaving her apartment, a note written in looping script. Stop digging. She doesn't deserve what comes next. Julian didn't blink. He didn't run. Instead, He called someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Julian. Natalia, I need your help. I need you to represent me. Natalia, quietly. Are you in danger? Julian. Not just me. Everyone who still believes in truth. Natalia. Then let's burn them down. The sting with the FBI already interested in Melissa's flash drive, Julian and Natalia crafted a plan, wired Julian for a conversation with a man known only by alias, the Fixer. They knew he'd reach out. He did. A meeting arranged through a law clerk. Midnight. Empty golf course on the edge of town. Julian showed up. The Fixer was older. Neatly dressed, calm, dead eyes. Fixer. You're clever, Reyes, but clever men get disappeared. Julian. Funny, because disappeared men don't usually carry voice recorders. Fixer, smirking. You think the law is going to protect you? Julian. No, I think justice will, even if I have to deliver it myself. Cue red and blue lights washing over the trees. FBI agents flooded the scene. The Fixer didn't flinch. He just muttered, checkmate's just the start of another game. The fallout judge, Margot Lafferty, resigned, publicly citing health issues. But behind closed doors, a grand jury convened. The Veriton case reopened with new criminal charges. The Fixer's identity? A former intelligence liaison turned private asset dealer, tied to 6 separate judicial interference cases. Melissa, relocated and forgotten by the press, wrote a letter to Julian. He hasn't opened it yet. 1 year later, in a lecture hall, Julian now teaches law. He doesn't wear a tie. His lectures are more like stories. Julian, to students. Law isn't clean. It's blood and glass. But if you wield it right, it can be a sword and a shield. He pauses. But the truth? The truth is heavier than justice, because it has to survive lies to mean anything. A hand raises in the back. A teenager. Nervous. Sharp eyes. Student. Did you ever forgive them, the ones who betrayed you? Julian looks out the window. Julian. I stopped giving them space in my head. That's the closest I'll ever get. But as the students file out, one figure lingers in the doorway. Dylan. Now 14. Taller, quiet, holding a notebook. Dylan. I read the files. I know everything. Julian's throat tightens. Julian. You shouldn't have had to. Dylan. But I did. And I still want to know you. Julian smiles, grief and hope braided in the lines of his face. Julian. Then let's start there. Fade to black. When a boy inherits secrets instead of money, he must decide who he wants to become. His father's son, or his mother's weapon. 5 years later, Boston University, Department of Political Science, Dylan Reyes stared at the final page of his thesis, Judicial Corruption and the Erosion of Democratic Trust, and hit print. His fingers trembled, but not from nerves. No, this was something deeper, because beneath the citations and legal references, there were names he hadn't dared to include. People who were still alive, watching, and the last chapter, redacted. Not because he didn't know, but because he finally did. Flashback, 2 months ago, San Francisco Dylan, to his mother, Melissa. Why did you lie about everything? She hadn't aged well. An air of paranoia clung to her like smoke. Melissa. You think your father was a saint? You think he didn't keep secrets too? Dylan. I'm not asking about Dad. I'm asking about you. Kieran, Aunt Harper, Lafferty. Why them? Why me? Melissa had paused, then done something that chilled him. She laughed, soft and bitter. Melissa. Because I was never supposed to survive that marriage. Dylan. What the hell does that mean? Melissa. It means your father wasn't the only one with enemies, and some of mine wanted me gone. So I used what I had. I used you. That's what motherhood is, Dylan. Sacrifice. Dylan had left that night and never gone back. But the damage was done. Now, a package arrives dorm mail room. A simple brown envelope, no return address. Inside, a worn cassette tape. A note, handwritten in angular script. The truth your father never knew. He borrowed an old player from the AV club and hit play. A voice crackled alive, Kieran's, in mid-conversation. He thinks it was Melissa, but she never pulled the real strings. Another voice, unfamiliar. You sure? She led him to ruin. Kieran. No, she was a tool, just like me. The one behind all of this. Has the Reyes name. Silence. Harper Reyes, his sister. The twist Dylan never saw. Coming. Everything froze. His aunt, Julian's sister, the one who'd begged him to forgive his mother, the one who'd co-signed Melissa's emergency custody papers when Julian was being investigated, the one who was always just slightly too involved. He started, digging, found financial records tying Harper Reyes to Kieran's consulting firm, dated years before the divorce, traced a trust fund in Dylan's name, funded through a dormant offshore account, created by Harper, pulled an email exchange between Harper and Judge Lafferty, sealed in a court server, leaked anonymously, subject line, Asset Disposal Plan, Phase 2, The Showdown. Chicago Dylan arranged to meet Harper at her favorite art gallery. Quiet, modern, cold. She smiled when she saw him. Harper. You've grown into his spine. Dylan. And you've grown into a monster. Harper, sighing. Is that what your mother told you, or did you finally figure out which shadow I was hiding in? Dylan. Why? Why betray your own brother? She looked genuinely pained. Harper. Because he was going to burn us all down. He got too close. He wanted to expose Veritin, but didn't know how far their roots ran. I had to redirect him. It was messy. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted to save him. Dylan. By destroying his life? Harper. By preserving the only part of him that mattered. You. Silence stretched between them. Harper, softly. He'll never know the real reason why I did it. But now you do. Dylan. And what do you want me to do with that? Harper. Nothing. You're still my legacy too, and my mistake. Epilogue. The choice Dylan stood on the edge of the podium holding a sealed manila folder. Inside, evidence of Harper's network of influence. Audio recordings of Kieran. Melissa's full confession, unedited. The truth. He looked at the room, journalists, legal scholars, government liaisons, cameras. He was about to speak, about to ignite a firestorm that would take down every last remnant of that empire. But then he stopped. A text from Julian. You don't owe the world vengeance. You only owe it truth. If the truth costs everything, make sure it's worth it. Dylan exhaled, and he stepped forward. Dylan into the mic. My name is Dylan Reyes, and this is the story of how justice nearly died in silence, because those closest to us whispered the loudest lies. He opened the folder, and the world changed. Game? She was the architect of the collapse, the keeper of silence, the queen-maker behind broken kings. But even queens bleed when the board flips. A week after Dylan's speech, Zurich, Switzerland. The snow whispered against the windows of a glass-walled chalet nestled in the Alps. Inside, Harper Reyes stood barefoot in a white wool robe, staring at a monitor streaming live U.S. news. Dylan's testimony had gone viral. Names had been named. A grand jury was forming. Subpoenas were dropping like, Snowflakes and Harper? She was smiling. Assistant, off-screen. Ms. Reyes, the board wants to know if they should relocate the primary assets. Harper, without turning. No, let them come. I want them to think they've won. Assistant. But the Reyes Foundation, Harper, is dead. Let it die. The name served its purpose. It brought me control. Assistant. What about Dylan? Harper. He did exactly what I raised him to do. Flashback. 17 years ago, Julian and Harper sat at a hospital cafeteria, coffee untouched between them. Melissa was in recovery after Dylan's birth. Julian, weary. I'm worried about her, about how unstable she's become. Harper. Then don't leave your son to her. Let me help raise him. Julian. He's my son, Harper. Harper, quietly. He could be more than that. He could be the future. Julian. He's a baby. Harper. Exactly. Now, Dylan learns the final truth. 3 days after his testimony, Dylan received an anonymous package. Inside, a silver USB drive and a handwritten note. Every game has a final move. Yours is coming. He plugged it into an air-gapped laptop. Hidden recording began, Harper's voice, calm, calculated, chilling. Harper recorded. Melissa was never supposed to raise Dylan. She was unstable, volatile, but she was useful. I fed her just enough to break Julian's grip. The investigation, the scandal, I gave the judge everything he needed. All Kieran had to do was follow the path I laid. Unknown. Male voice. You set her up to fail. Harper. No, I gave her the opportunity to collapse with dignity. She chose the mess. Unknown voice. And Dylan? Harper. Was the real plan. A clean slate. My legacy in a world that had devoured too many men. Dylan sat frozen. The truth sank in. Not only had Harper manipulated his mother, she had orchestrated the fall of her own brother, just to raise him as a weapon. Harper's arrest, or so it seemed Interpol made it flashy, Harper Reyes arrested in a private hangar near Vienna. Bound for extradition, Dylan watched the footage on TV, glass of bourbon in hand, his hands shaking. It was over. Until 2 days later, when the prison transport exploded en route to The Hague. No survivors, no body. Just a scorched ID bracelet and a news cycle begging for closure. But Dylan knew better, and so did Melissa, who called him for the first time in months. Melissa, voice low. She's not dead, Dylan. Dylan. I know. Melissa. She'll come for you, because you're all she ever wanted, and all she failed to control. Final scene. Florence, Italy. A woman walked through the Uffizi, sunglasses hiding her sharp eyes, a red scarf wrapped elegantly around her neck. She stopped, before Caravaggio's Judith beheading Holofernes, and smiled faintly. Stranger, joining her quietly. They think you're dead. Harper, without looking. They've always underestimated me. Stranger. What now? Harper. Now we wait. The board is already reforming, and Dylan, he's exactly where I want him. Angry, isolated, powerful. She turned slowly. Harper. A pawn that thinks he's the king is still playing the wrong game. Trust is dead. Family is war. And the past? It's not behind them anymore. It's waiting in the walls. 3 weeks later. Back in the States, Dylan sat at a dimly lit bar in Boston, staring at a list of names scribbled in black ink. Names of people, tied to his aunt's shadow network. Names she trusted, names she burned. But one stood out, Lucian Strand, a man no one had seen in 8 years. Once Harper's legal architect, the one who made impossible things disappear, and the one person Dylan hoped was still alive because Lucian had the Judas Ledger, a black book, a ghost file. It contained every bribe, every judge, every sealed record Harper used to dismantle her enemies, including Julian, Melissa, and Dylan himself. Cut 2. An underground vault in Lisbon Lucian Strand, older now, graying beard, eyes sharp as knives, walked into a room lined with steel walls and motion-triggered lights. He opened a titanium case marked with a red H. Inside, bound in black leather, was the Judas ledger. Lucian, to himself. "You always said you'd be back for this, Harper, but you never said what you'd do if someone else opened it first." He poured himself a glass of absinthe and picked up a satellite phone. "Lucienne. It's time. Call Dylan Reyes." Meanwhile, Melissa's secret. Melissa's hands trembled as she inserted an old key into a lockbox hidden in the wall of her late grandmother's house. The only person who knew this place existed was her. Inside were letters, sealed in Harper's handwriting, dozens of them written over 20 years, but addressed not to Melissa, not even to Dylan, to someone named Sienna. And when Melissa opened the first letter, it felt like the floor dropped beneath her. "My dearest Sienna, I've watched from afar as they erased your name, your story, but I promised I'd make the world pay for forgetting you. Dylan was never just a nephew. He was the replacement, the clean lie to hide the broken truth of what they did to you." Melissa sat back, the air leaving her lungs. Melissa, whispering, "Oh my God, there was another child." Dylan meets Lucienne, Geneva, a clandestine meeting in a bank vault. Lucienne places the Judas ledger on the table. Lucian, "You think you know Harper, you don't. You were her prototype." Dylan, "Then what the hell am I?" Lucian, a second attempt. He opens the ledger. There are files on fertility clinics, adoption records, payments to doctors, and a DNA sequence labeled Project Sienna Reyes. Dylan stares. Dylan, "She had another child?" Lucian, "No. She lost a child, years before you were born, and she never forgave the world for it." Cut 2, somewhere in Southeast Asia, a young woman in a rural clinic is bandaging a patient's arm. She has Harper's eyes. She speaks 5 languages, has no known parents, grew up in a private orphanage funded by a now-defunct nonprofit. The nurse calls her Sienna. A call comes in from an encrypted line. The woman answers, voice on the line, "Your aunt is alive, and your brother just found the ledger." Sienna doesn't flinch. Sienna, "Then it's time I met the family." Final scene. 3 paths. Converging Dylan in Geneva, eyes dark with fury, the Judas ledger in his hands, preparing to go public, until he sees a page stamped Sienna Reyes terminated. Melissa in Boston, tearing through the letters, uncovering Harper's ultimate betrayal, not of Julian, but of herself, and Harper, in a hidden villa near Naples, standing at a table covered in blueprints. One blueprint has Dylan's face on, it. Another has Lucian's, and the third, blank. Until Harper writes one word, Sienna. She taps a red marker on the page. Harper, to herself. Now the real game begins. There are wounds deeper than betrayal, those carved by the people who made you, and those who tried to unmake you. Opening scene, a beach in southern Thailand. The waves crashed in rhythmic fury as Sienna Reyes walked barefoot across wet sand. In her hand, one of Harper's letters. She read it again, mouthing the words as if memorizing a script written long before she could speak. "They told me you died. They lied. I burned the world for you, Sienna. And now the world burns for me. Soon, they'll all come for what they think is left. When they do, don't flinch. Don't forgive." Behind her, the man who raised her, Father Duval, former French intelligence, watched with narrowed eyes. He knew what came next. He'd trained her for it. Duval. "The brother's alive. The aunt's in hiding. The ledger's loose. The time for shadows is over." Sienna. "Then let's pull them all into the light." She handed him the letter and walked toward the helicopter waiting in the jungle. The war she was bred for had arrived. Boston. Melissa and Dylan reunite. For the first time in over a year, Melissa stood face to face with her son in her Beacon Hill apartment. He looked harder now, older, not just in years, but in soul. She slid the stack of letters across the table. Melissa. Harper lied about more than you. She erased someone. Dylan, quietly. I know. Her name is Sienna. Melissa. No. Her name was mine once. I found birth certificates. Forged identities. I was pregnant in 2001, long before you. And then Harper arranged a stillbirth. But the records say she lived. Dylan, freezing. You're saying she's my sister? Melissa nodded, tears rimming her eyes. Melissa. And Harper stole her, raised her, molded her. Dylan. Jesus Christ. Melissa. This isn't revenge anymore. This is reclamation. Meanwhile, Harper moves first, in a hidden sanctuary beneath the ruins of a Tuscan monastery. Harper orchestrated her next move. Her most trusted follower entered, whispering an update. Follower. Sienna has taken the bait. She contacted Dylan. Harper didn't even blink. Harper. Good. Let them circle. The truth is only dangerous. When it's delivered too soon, she opened a suitcase of photos. Inside were surveillance shots. Melissa in Boston. Dylan in Geneva. And Lucian Strand. Missing. She pulled a red pen and slashed a giant X through Lucian's face. Harper. He'll resurface. They all do. But when he does, I'll be ready. Cut 2. A safe house in Istanbul. Lucian coughed, blood into a rag. He was dying. But before he went, he had to deliver one last file. It was encrypted, protected by a series of riddles only Dylan could solve, codes embedded in memories of his childhood. He sent the package and called Melissa. Lucian, weakly. I wronged you. I was Harper's knife for too long. But this file? It's the heart, not the ledger, the heart of her empire. Melissa. What's in it? Lucian. Not what? Who? There's someone else she's keeping hidden. Someone none of you know exists yet. The line went dead. Final scene. The shadows return. A storage locker in Marrakesh. Inside, a young man, no older than 22, opened a trunk filled with Harper's tapes, recordings, DNA samples. On the wall, written in chalk, Project LX, unknown voice, off camera. It's time to wake up. The young man turned, confused. His eyes were amber. His features, a haunting blend of Harper, Julian, and someone else. He was the final piece, the one no one was prepared for. End of part 8. Now we're nearing the center of Harper's web. Would you like to follow Sienna as she meets Dylan face to face, and they discover they might not be enemies after all? Explore Melissa's discovery of who Project Lex is and how it connects to Julian's buried past. Delve into Harper's counterattack as she prepares to unleash her most dangerous creation yet. Choose your next chapter, and I'll unravel it. Part 9. The sun that shouldn't exist. When the past is buried too deep, it doesn't stay dead. It becomes something else. Something worse. Opening scene. Boston, late night. Melissa stood alone in her apartment, the encrypted file Lucian left now decrypted on her screen. She scrolled through page after page, her mouth going dry. Melissa whispers, "No, this can't be real." What began as genetic experiments under the guise of fertility treatments in the late 1990s had spiraled into something far more sinister. Harper's file labeled it LX, a code name, short for legacy extraction, but it wasn't a concept. It was a person. Subject 23C, born 2003. Artificial embryo using Melissa's harvested egg, Julian's extracted DNA, and a third donor. Classified. Melissa felt her legs weaken. Melissa. She used my DNA, Julian's, without us ever knowing. The file went deeper. Harper had intended LX to be the clean heir, genetically perfect, emotionally conditioned, trained from infancy in isolation. But something went wrong. Lex disappeared. Geneva. Dylan and Sienna. Meet in a private library at the top of an old Swiss tower. Dylan waited with armed guards. When the elevator opened, Sienna Reyes walked in. Neither moved for several long seconds. Dylan. So, you're the ghost my life was built over. Sienna. You're the placeholder mine was stolen for. Dylan. Nice to meet you too. She smirked slightly, then tossed a photo on the table. Sienna. This is LX, trained in Marrakesh. Harper's last weapon. Dylan, studying the photo. He looks like me. Sienna. Because he is you, or what Harper wanted you to be. He was her endgame, a weapon with your face and my fire. Dylan, slowly. Where is he now? Sienna. Gone. Off the grid. But when he returns, he won't come to talk. Cut 2. Morocco. 2. Amlex sat in a stone courtyard under moonlight, headphones on, listening to old recordings Harper made for him as a child. You are my true legacy. When they forget me, you will remind them what I was capable of. He replayed a video, Julian holding a baby, not Lex, but Dylan. A flash of anger crossed Alex's eyes. Lex, to himself. He raised the wrong son. He reached into a duffel bag and pulled out a gun. Not for random violence. This was surgical revenge. Back in Boston, Melissa's final connection. Melissa dug into Harper's sealed estate files and found a shell corporation called Peregrine Institute. Listed as a research entity, it was actually a black site facility in Romania. She cross-referenced the files and found a visitor log from 2010. The last entry? Julian Reyes, Melissa, to herself. Julian knew. He met LX. She pulled out a hidden folder of Julian's personal journals. In one entry, he has your eyes. I didn't think I could love another child, but I saw him smile, and I almost broke. Harper says he can never know the truth. Says he's not meant for a normal life. I agreed, and I hate myself for it. Melissa dropped the journal. Julian, her husband, chose silence. Chose to let another child grow up in the dark, trained as a weapon, engineered like a machine. Cut 2. Harper's final gambit in a fortified monastery-turned-command post. Harper sat before a screen showing LX's location pinging back online. Harper, smiling. My boy's finally coming home. Her advisor shifted nervously. Advisor. With all due respect, he's not under control anymore. Harper. He was never supposed to be. I didn't raise a child. I forged an apocalypse. And now the only thing standing between him and fire is a sister who doesn't know what love is and a brother who thinks honor is enough. She stood and turned off the screen. Harper. Let them come. Let them bring the truth. It won't save them. Lex was never built to join the family. He was built to end it. End of part none so. Dylan and Sienna must now team up, rivals born of betrayal, to face a brother neither knew existed. Melissa is forced to reckon with the truth. Her husband helped create the monster. And LX? He's coming for all of them, but not for answers, for vengeance. Shall we continue with Dylan and Sienna tracking down LX in Marrakesh before he reaches the States? Harper's final weapon unleashing chaos as her empire begins to crack? Melissa confronting the truth with Julian's journals, uncovering a betrayal far older than she imagined? Your story. Your path. Let's dig deeper. Some family secrets aren't buried. They're abandoned, and what's left behind learns how to crawl back. Scene opens. Marrakesh, Morocco. The narrow alleyways of the Medina twisted like a serpent. In the middle of the chaos, Dylan and Sienna moved quietly, dressed down, eyes constantly scanning. Dylan, quietly. "Are you sure he's still here?" Sienna, checking her burner phone. Harper's last known ping was from an apartment outside the Spice Square. If Lex is still running Harper's ghost code, he'll return to whatever training node she embedded in him. Dylan. Training node? Sienna. Think safe house, but make it psychotic. He's not sleeping in hotels, Dylan. He was taught not to need comfort, only weapons and revenge. They stopped as a young boy tugged on Dylan's jacket silently, handing him a folded note. "Too late. He knows you're here." Meanwhile, inside the safe house, Lex stood silently in a room with cracked mirrors, dozens of them. He watched himself from every angle. His face, Dylan's face, their father's jawline, Melissa's eyes. Lex, to his reflection. "You don't know me yet, but you will." On a table sat photographs: Melissa, Julian, Dylan, Sienna. Red circles, question marks. On Dylan's, one word: replacement. Suddenly, a voice played through a speaker system, Harper's old AI recordings. "If you're hearing this, it means they found you. It also means you're ready. Lex, you were not built to join the world. You were built to unmake it." Cut to nightfall, Marrakesh. Rooftops. Dylan and Sienna scaled the rooftops quietly. Below, they spotted him, Lex, moving like a shadow between shadows. Sienna, steadying her scope. He's got eyes in every direction. He's not running. He's luring. Dylan. Then we change the game. They dropped down, cornering him in an alley. Dylan, raising hands. "You don't have to run." "I'm not Harper. I'm not Julian. I just want to talk." Lex, voice cold. "You talk like a leader, like someone who inherited everything. Do you even know what it costs for you to exist?" Dylan. "You think I asked for this? I didn't even know about you until last week." Lex, to Sienna. "And you let them lock me away, while you became Harper's new enforcer." Sienna, defensive. "That's not fair." Lex. "No, it's perfect. You had the blood. He had the name. And me, I was the weapon, the one they kept in the dark so no one had to feel guilty." Suddenly, he pulled a grenade, not to kill, but to scatter. Smoke exploded. Sienna fired, missed. Chase. Through the Medina, Dylan pursued, ducking between market stalls and vaulted archways. He tackled LX into a wall, pinning him. Dylan. "This ends now. You're not her creation anymore. You can choose." Lex gritted. "I've already chosen. She gave me a purpose. You took it from me. Now I take everything from you." He kneed Dylan and vanished again. Later, that night, in a quiet hotel, Dylan sat bruised, blood on his knuckles. Sienna cleaned her sniper rifle in silence. Dylan. He's not just angry. He's broken, like someone pulled the stitching out of him. Sienna. Harper didn't raise a son. She bred a vendetta, and now it's coming for all of us. Dylan. So how do we stop someone who doesn't want saving? Sienna. We don't. We outthink him, because that's the one thing he's never been taught. Dylan leaned forward, pulling up the encrypted flash drive he found in the apartment LX had been using. Inside, a video. Julian Reyes, much older than they'd seen before, speaking to the camera. Julian. If this message reaches you, it means Harper is dead, or worse. And Lex, if you're watching this, you're more than she made you to be. You were never a mistake. You were, my son, I fought for you. They told me you were lost. I never believed them. If you can find Dylan, protect him. He's not your enemy. He's your brother. And if you can't forgive me, just remember, Harper built monsters, but she didn't build you to stay one. End of Part X. The tides are shifting. Lex now knows Julian once tried to protect him. Dylan holds the only emotional key that might stop him. Sienna's facing the sins of being Harper's blade. But Harper's final plan? It isn't done. There's a final location buried deep in Harper's estate files. Project Oubliette, a forgotten vault where the real inheritance is kept. What do you say? Shall we head there next? Lex intercepts the message and begins to question Harper's truth. Dylan and Sienna race to the Oubliette vault before LX unleashes what's inside. Melissa unearths Julian's sealed confession video, a final twist that could shift everything. Ready when you are. The end is coming. But it's not the one anyone expects. There are things a person can never outrun: betrayal, choices, and the ghosts of the past. But sometimes, it's the truth that makes you feel hunted, more than anything else. Scene opens. A dimly lit estate in the Swiss Alps, the Grand Estate, was buried under the weight of snow, its once sturdy walls now a shell of their former self. Harper's headquarters, now cold and empty, held secrets buried for decades. The Oubliette vault was the last legacy, hidden beneath layers of dead-end corridors, buried under encrypted codes and silent walls. Dylan and Sienna stood at the entrance, eyes scanning the high-tech security system. The password had been in the files, but the vault itself was locked in an impossible labyrinth. Dylan. This is it. This is where it all ends. Sienna, nodding. Let's see if the truth is worth more than the blood Harper spilled for it. They descended deeper into the facility, the hum of the encrypted lock system their only company. The further they went, the colder it became, and the more they felt the weight of Harper's long-held secrets. Cut 2. A remote location. In Marrakesh. Meanwhile, LX was finally beginning to understand the gravity of what he was part of. His head swam with the new information, the video from Julian playing on a loop. His heart, what was left of it, began to ache. Lex, to himself, voice breaking. He wanted me safe? He clenched his fists, eyes flickering to the room's walls, lined with weapons, monitors, and unfinished projects. Harper's voice echoed through his mind. You were never meant to belong. Lex's expression hardened again. He couldn't forgive Julian, or even himself. But there was one thing he could change: the future. Inside the Oubliette vault, the door groaned open, revealing a high-tech vault. Walls lined with shelves filled with old files, digital recordings, and forgotten gadgets. Sienna whispering. Harper was collecting more than just bloodlines. She was building something else. Dylan moved forward, his eyes scanning for anything that could explain the vastness of Project Oubliette. Then, on the back wall, a massive terminal flickered to life. Dylan gripping Sienna's arm. This is it. Sienna taking a breath. Whatever you find, it's going to change everything. Dylan approached the terminal, keyed in the final code. The screen lit up with a single word. Welcome. Cut 2. Julian's confession. Unveiled. The first file that opened was a recording. Julian Reyes sat in a dark room, his face haunted with guilt. He spoke directly into the camera. Julian, if you're hearing this, it means it's too late to stop the cycle. I never wanted this for any of us. Harper's vision, her obsession with legacy, it consumed her. But I wanted to protect you both. I wanted to give you the chance to live. I made mistakes. But there is one thing I can say clearly. Lex wasn't a weapon. He was a child, my son, the son I never knew how to raise, and who Harper trained to be everything he wasn't meant to be. The truth is, if you can stop him, You must. He's been programmed for war. His mind is a battlefield. And if he finds what I hid here, he'll rewrite everything. I'm sorry. I tried to give him a chance, but Harper, she was always 3 steps ahead. The truth about Oubliette, a legacy of war. Dylan and Sienna stood frozen, listening to Julian's words. Julian. Oubliette was never just about Lex. It was about creating the perfect heir, the one who could survive anything, an heir who could destroy everything. The terminal clicked to another file, revealing something worse than they imagined. A list of names. Julian in the recording. The other heirs. Lex wasn't the only one. Harper's vision of a new world required many, subjects that could build it, control it. She took my son, but there were others, scattered, waiting, ready to finish what she started. Cut 2. The final confrontation, in the distance. LX was coming. Dylan could feel it, the pull of fate, the final clash. He and Sienna had learned enough, but not everything. The truth wasn't just hidden in the vault. It was buried in the legacy LX was raised to destroy. They heard the sound of heavy boots on the stone floors. Sienna to Dylan. We need to move. He's coming. Dylan, shaking his head. I won't let him become Harper. We end this together. The vault door shuts as Dylan and Sienna rush to leave. The door of the vault slammed shut behind them. The last thing they heard before they were locked inside was a cold, mocking voice. Lex, you really thought you could undo what's already done? Sienna, gritting her teeth. You don't know what you're dealing with, Lex. But the door didn't budge, and the final words rang through the metal walls. Lex, I am not your weapon. You are mine. End of part Estes. The clock is ticking, and the game is coming to an end. Dylan is trapped inside the vault, with Sienna beside him. They can only pray that the truth they've uncovered can save them before LX unleashes his final fury. Lex, no longer the puppet of Harper, now holds the reins of his destiny. But will he destroy everything in his wake, or choose a new path? Harper, even in death, has left behind a trail of weapons and broken promises, a legacy that haunts every step. The walls of the vault had become their prison, and the seconds ticked away as Dylan and Sienna scrambled for an escape. The weight of the situation pressed down on them, and despite their best efforts, the oppressive silence of the metal walls seemed to suffocate every hope they had left. Dylan's mind raced, but he had no time to process the depth of what they had uncovered. Lex wasn't just a creation. He was a product of a machine built to destroy everything and everyone who crossed its path. The clock in the corner of the room ticked louder, mocking their futile attempts to break free. Sienna, nervously whispering, What now, Dylan? We can't just stay here and wait for him. Dylan, gritting his teeth. I won't let him become what Harper wanted. We can't. I won't let this go on. He scanned the vault for any way out, his heart racing. He knew LX would be coming. But where could they run? The escape routes had all been blocked. They were trapped in a room filled with the dangerous legacy of a project that was never meant to succeed. Cut 2. Lex's pursuit. Lex stood at the end of the hall, his figure silhouetted against the dim light, and for the first time he wasn't just a weapon. He was the culmination of everything Harper had worked for. But there was more to the story. He didn't have to be the monster. Lex, to himself, in a low, contemplative voice. They think they can stop me, but they don't know what I am. What we are. For the first time, doubt crept into LX's mind. Was Dylan right? Could he ever truly escape the ghost of Harper's twisted plan? Or was he doomed to follow in the footsteps of those who created him? He stepped forward, his mind a battlefield of emotions, torn between what was expected of him and what his own heart longed for. Freedom. The hidden passage, as the seconds ticked by, Dylan's eyes landed on something they had missed earlier. a small unmarked keypad embedded in the floor. It was nearly invisible against the gray stone, but when he approached it, the mechanism sprang to life. His heart skipped a beat. Dylan, whispering to Sienna, "This is it. We can get out." He keyed in the sequence he had seen earlier in Julian's confession, and the floor in front of them slowly began to retract, revealing a hidden passage that led deeper into the mountain. It was their only chance. Cut 2. Melissa's revelation. Meanwhile, Melissa, sitting at the old farmhouse where she had been lying low, was grappling with the reality of the truth she had uncovered. The encrypted file had given her enough information to piece together what had happened, but there was still so much left unanswered. How much more damage had Harper's machinations caused? And where did her role fit in all of this? Melissa, quietly to herself, staring at the file. "I should have known. I was too blind to see what she was doing. She didn't just ruin Dylan's life. She ruined all of us." Her fingers hovered over the keys, the weight of her next decision settling in her chest. She had the power to expose everything, to destroy what Harper had worked for all these years. But there was one thing that still made her hesitate. Lex, what would happen to him once the truth was out? Would he continue the war Harper had begun? Or would he choose a different path? The chase. Lex catches up. The hidden passage had led Dylan and Sienna into a narrow corridor, the walls of the mountain closing in around them. But the sound of Lex's footsteps echoed louder and louder. They had no time. Sienna, out of breath. "Dylan, we're running out of time." They rounded a corner, only to find themselves face to face with LX. His eyes glowed with a strange intensity, but his expression was unreadable. LX, coldly, "I should have known you'd make it this far, but this ends here." Dylan and Sienna stood their ground, each knowing that the coming moments could decide everything. The choice was in LX's hands, whether to fall under the weight of his programming or to break free from the chains that had been forced upon him. The final. Choice. Dylan took a step forward, his voice calm but unwavering. "Dylan, you don't have to do this, LX. You're not what Harper made you. You have the power to choose." There was a pause, just long enough for the tension to rise and for LX to question everything he had been told. His gaze flickered between Dylan and Sienna, and for a split second something in him softened. He clenched his fists. Lex, with a growl, "You don't get it. I was never meant to have a choice. I'm a weapon. Sienna, interrupting, "No, Lex, you're not. You're human. You always were." In that instant, everything seemed to shift. Lex stepped back, his entire body trembling with confusion. Lex, shaking his head, almost pleading, "But what if I can't stop? What if I can't change what I was built to be?" Dylan took another step forward, his voice firm. "Dylan, you can. I believe you can. The choice that changes everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Lex's shoulders slumped, his body no longer the rigid form of a weapon, but the fragile form of a man caught between two worlds. Then, with a slow, almost reluctant motion, he lowered his hand, the one that had been poised for destruction. Lex, softly, "I don't want to be a weapon anymore." Dylan and Sienna exchanged a look of disbelief. In that moment, Lex chose. And the mountain that had once felt so suffocating, so heavy, seemed to lighten just enough to give them hope. Epilogue. A new dawn weeks later, as the world grappled with the fallout of Harper's empire crumbling, Dylan, Sienna, and LX stood at the edge of a new world. A world that had been built on lies, manipulation, and violence, but a world that had a chance to rebuild itself. Sienna, quietly to Dylan, "We did it." Dylan, smiling softly. We didn't just survive. We changed the story. And as they looked to the horizon, they knew that the road ahead would be long, but it would be theirs to walk. The end. But the story doesn't have to end here. The weeks following their escape felt like a fragile piece. Dylan, Sienna, and LX had escaped the immediate danger of Harper's empire, but the echoes of their past, of betrayal, secrets, and the complex web of power they had uncovered, lingered like shadows on the edge of their lives. The world outside was uncertain, filled with the promise of change, but clouded by the weight of what they had left behind. The rebuilding Dylan's mind was constantly in motion. He had spent years fighting to stay afloat in a world that wanted to drown him, and now, with the truth out and the power of Harper's legacy shattered, he found himself asking an uncomfortable question. What do I do with all this freedom? Dylan, sitting on a bench, eyes distant. I thought I had it all figured out. But now it's like I'm standing at the edge of something I don't even recognize anymore. Sienna sat beside him, her presence a steady anchor. She had seen him at his lowest, and now she stood with him in this uncertain new world, watching as the man he had once been slowly transformed into someone else. Someone better, maybe. Sienna, softly, you'll figure it out. We will. It's just a matter of finding our way forward. The weight of the years spent in the shadows of Harper's schemes was something they couldn't shake off, but together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Lex's awakening Lex, too, was grappling with his own transformation. Once a weapon, once a tool of destruction, he had been given something far more precious: choice. It was both a gift and a burden, for in choosing to walk away from the person he had been, Lex faced the terrifying unknown of forging a new identity, one that didn't revolve around war or survival. The question was, who would he be now? Lex, to himself, standing before a mirror, voice barely a whisper. What am I supposed to be now? I don't even know what it means to be human. Sienna had told him once that he wasn't defined by the machine that created him.
But every time he looked in the mirror, he's always he felt something different, something warmer.
Sat in the corner of the room, a distant thought crossed his mind. Could he learn what it meant to live? To have a purpose that wasn't rooted in violence or obedience? Melissa's return. As for Melissa, she had spent those same weeks in hiding, piecing together the shattered fragments of her life. The truth of her involvement, her choice to side with Harper for so long, ate at her, but it wasn't the only thing that haunted her. What would the world look like now that everything had been exposed? Where would her place in it be? One evening, she received an unexpected visitor. Dylan's voice came through her old encrypted phone line, his tone far more relaxed than the last time they spoke. Dylan, over the phone. Melissa, it's me. You okay? Melissa pauses, surprise in her voice. I didn't expect to hear from you. Dylan. We've both made our mistakes, but I'm not here to talk about that. We have a chance now, a real chance to make things right. I'm asking, would you come back? Help us rebuild. Melissa didn't know what to say. Could she even find redemption in a world that had seen her at her worst? She'd lost her way, betrayed her brother, her friends, and everything she once stood for. But Dylan's words echoed in her mind, a beacon in the dark. Melissa, softly. You really think there's a place for me? Dylan, with conviction. I do. We all have a part to play in fixing this. The question is, what do we do now with the second chance we've been given? There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Melissa finally spoke. Melissa. I'll be there. The future's uncertainty, back at the old farmhouse, The cracks in the foundation of their past began to fade as the future opened up before them. Lex continued to wrestle with his new identity, but he wasn't alone in that struggle anymore. Dylan and Sienna's support, their belief in him, gave him the strength to face each new day with renewed purpose. As for Melissa, she had returned, wiser, scarred, but determined to be part of something better. She worked alongside them, helping, to clean up the wreckage of Harper's empire, ensuring that every secret that remained buried in the shadows was brought to light. Together they built a new world, one brick at a time. And for the first time in a long while, Dylan realized something important. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was finally living. The unseen enemy. But just as they began to settle into their new lives, they couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. There were still too many unknowns, too many whispers of power moving in the background. And then, one day, Dylan received a cryptic message. The message: "This isn't over, not yet. You've only seen the beginning. The world you've built is fragile, and there's always someone waiting to tear it down." The message had no sender. It was a reminder that their victory, however sweet, was not without its cost. The final decision. The future was still uncertain, but they had come too far to turn back now. Dylan, Sienna, Alex, and Melissa stood at the edge of their new life, knowing that the past was never truly behind them. There were still enemies to face, new alliances to form, and a world to rebuild from the ruins. The question now wasn't whether they could survive, but whether they could finally shape a future where they were more than just the survivors of a broken system. Dylan, looking out over the horizon, resolute. "We've fought our way here. We won't stop now. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." And with that, they stepped forward into the uncertain future, their fates intertwined, in a journey that had only just begun. The end, for now. The days that followed the cryptic message felt heavier. The weight of what they had fought for, what they had sacrificed, began to creep back into their minds. Each of them carried their own burden, their own scars, and the feeling that something, or someone, was still watching them. The past, like a ghost, lingered at the edges of their lives, refusing to stay buried. But Dylan, more than anyone, couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. Every step forward seemed to bring them closer to a new revelation, something darker, deeper. They had won, but in the back of his mind, the question gnawed at him. Who was still out there? And why were they threatening everything they had fought to rebuild? The return of a shadow one evening, as the team gathered in their makeshift operations room, Alex's enhanced vision picked up a small, blinking dot on his screen. A signal. At first it seemed inconsequential, just another random signal in a world of noise. But then the message appeared. It wasn't just random, it was a warning. The message: "I know what you did. I'm coming for you." No sender, no context, just those chilling words. They hung in the air like a fog, unsettling and cryptic. Dylan stood frozen. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Dylan, gritting his teeth. "They're back!" Unraveling the truth as the team dug deeper into the message, Sienna and LEX quickly realized something disturbing. It wasn't coming from anywhere near their current location. The coordinates traced back to an abandoned underground facility, one, that was thought to be long destroyed. The same facility where they had uncovered the first fragments of Harper's empire. Sienna, quietly analyzing the data. That facility, it was wiped clean years ago. There shouldn't be anything left. Lex, his voice mechanical but tinged with tension. Then why are they still active? Whoever's behind this, they've been waiting. The realization hit hard. Someone had been planning, waiting, perhaps for years. They had known that Dylan and his team would eventually take down Harper, but they hadn't intervened. They had bided their time, allowing the chaos to play out, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The game of Shadows Melissa, who had been working on a separate investigation, stumbled upon something disturbing. She had been tracking financial transactions linked to Harper's old allies, and she had found a disturbing pattern. Someone had been siphoning funds into off-the-books accounts, money that had been hidden away long before their victory. But it wasn't just about money. It was about influence, power, and the name that surfaced over and over again was one that none of them had considered for a long time. Melissa, her voice sharp. It's him, Griffin Langford. The name was like a cold wind blowing through their plans. Griffin Langford had been a shadow even deeper than Harper, a man of influence, untouchable in his ways, connected to various global organizations, and with ties to people who never seemed to age. He had always been the one in the background, orchestrating events from afar, but no one had ever been able to pin him down. Until now. Dylan, eyes narrowing. Langford. He was a ghost, an idea more than a person. But if he's behind this, he couldn't finish the thought. If Langford had returned from the shadows, everything they had worked for was at risk. The Silent Alliance. A week later, the team discovered something more chilling. Langford wasn't working alone. There were others, hidden factions, powerful, entities waiting to emerge. Dylan, Sienna, LX, and Melissa found themselves pulled back into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where the rules were constantly shifting. But there was more. Sienna's investigative skills began to reveal connections to someone else, someone who had played them all from the start. Sienna, eyes widening in disbelief. No, it can't be. Dylan turned to face her, his stomach sinking. Dylan. What is it? What's going on? Sienna, gritting her teeth. It's my sister. She's been working with Langford all along. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. It had been Sienna's own sister, who had been the silent hand in the shadows, orchestrating events from behind the scenes. The very same sister who had once been so close to Sienna. The betrayal ran deeper than any of them had imagined. A reckoning Dylan and his team were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very lives against an enemy who knew them better than they knew themselves. Langford and his elusive allies were determined to finish what they had started. The past wasn't just unfinished business. It was a ticking time bomb, and it was about to explode. The first move came one fateful evening when the team was ambushed. They had been tracking Langford's movements, but the trap had already been set. An explosion rocked their safe house, sending them scattering into the night. Dylan, gritting his teeth as debris falls around them. It's a game, and we're the pawns. But Dylan wasn't about to let himself or his team be sacrificed. Not after everything they had gone through. Not after everything they had fought for. The unexpected twist as they regrouped, another message came through. The message. You can't outrun your past. It's time to pay the price for your sins. Dylan's heart stopped. The sender was not Langford, not even a member of his silent coalition. It was someone else entirely. Dylan, voice shaking. It's Harper. Somehow she's still alive. She never left. She's been pulling the strings this whole time. Sienna and LX exchanged a knowing glance. It couldn't be true. Harper had been executed. They had seen it, lived through it. But if Harper was indeed alive, it meant the war was far from over. And this time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the truth and the freedom to live without fear.